Welcome to the deep dive. We grab the most compelling source material, the articles, the legal filings, the personal notes, and really just distill it all into the crucial, need-to-know insights.
And today we are taking on a case that, honestly, it feels less like criminal law and more like a philosophical debate.
A debate on the nature of knowledge, of skepticism, and, ultimately of power.
Exactly.
Our focus is the legal ordeal of a really highly educated, independent scholar, a man named Dr. Chen Jingyuan. He's a physicist by training with a PhD in nonlinear complex systems theory.
And his life was just completely turned upside down in Kunming back in 2022.
And the alleged crime. A year and 8 months in prison. Not for, espionage or fraud, but for his activity on social media.
All under this notoriously elastic charge of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, or PXQT.
And that's the core of what we're going to get into.
Right. We are dissecting Dr. Chen's conviction by scrutinizing the official legal documents, the prosecution's case, the first instance judgment, the second instance ruling, and we're comparing them to this incredibly detailed legal defense that Dr. Chen himself wrote from prison.
It's just a rare opportunity, isn't it, to see an academic use their full intellectual toolkit to defend themselves against a political charge like this.
It really is.
So our mission today is, I think, simple, but also pretty profound. We want to understand how just a handful of online four-words posts, he argued, were just for academic research, were somehow turned into a major criminal case that supposedly caused serious chaos.
Yeah, when you look at the actual evidence they used,
Yes.
it's a baffling collection of things. It was all content that Dr. Chen had simply forwarded or engaged with on Twitter.
A non-domestic platform.
Right, and it wasn't stuff he created, he was just sharing it.
And it's not like it was all one type of thing, right? The
Yeah.
evidence itself was this mosaic of different kinds of content.
A complete mosaic. You have works of art like the Umbrella Girl cartoon, which is obviously a symbolic expression.
Okay.
Then you have public posts from, say, foreign diplomatic bodies, like information originally published by the U.S. Embassy in China.
So, official sources.
Official public sources. And then a whole pile of what is clearly academic material. Political commentary, historical articles, theoretical pieces on political spectra, that kind of thing. And the prosecution just lumped it all together. Art, foreign speech, scholarly opinion, they treated it all as if it were the same thing. False information.
Which seems like a huge leap. To make that stick, especially for online speech, the law must have a pretty high burden of proof. I mean, this PXUT charge can't just be about sharing something you don't like.
It has a very high three-part threshold that has to be proven simultaneously. And these are the three pillars of the charge, based on Article 293 of the criminal law and a 2013 judicial interpretation.
And you have to prove all three.
All three. If even one fails, the whole case is supposed to fall apart. First, there's the objective act. The state has to prove you fabricated or knowingly spread false information.
Knowingly. Okay.
Second, the subjective intent. This is the big one. The accused must mingzi, which means they have to clearly know the information is false, but they spread it intentionally anyway?
So it's not enough to be mistaken, you have to be malicious.
Precisely. And third, the result. The act has to cause a real...
This is all about how the court tried to prove that subjective intent, that mingzi.
Yeah, this is where the reasoning just takes a really bizarre and, frankly, dangerous turn. The court had no direct evidence that Dr. Chen knew anything he forwarded was false, so they had to bridge that gap somehow.
So how did they do it?
The first instance judgment argued that Dr. Chen, and I'm quoting here, as a person with a high academic level, PhD, should have the ability to discern right from wrong.
Wait. So the argument is, because he's smart, he must be guilty.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
The court concluded that because he had these superior cognitive abilities, he must have knowingly forwarded content that was insulting and attacking, and therefore he had the malicious intent they needed to prove.
That is terrifying. It completely flips the script. His education becomes a liability.
It's identity-based guilt. A less educated person might get the benefit of the doubt. Oh, they didn't know any better, but the PhD is held to this higher standard of assumed malice.
So how did a physicist even begin to counter an argument like that?
Well, this is where he turned their logic completely on its head, using his own background in science and philosophy.
I'm fascinated to hear this.
He focused on the very nature of being a scholar. He pointed out that his 2 decades of advanced study trained his mind to be critically skeptical, not absolutely certain about things. He even brought up concepts like Gödel's incompleteness theorem,
Whoa, okay, Gödel's theorem in a criminal court. You have to connect the dots for me there.
He was making a very deep point about epistemological humility.
Okay.
A scholar, by definition, sees all knowledge, especially complex political or historical claims, as something to be questioned, to be revised with new evidence. So he argued he does not and cannot possess the absolute certainty that Mingzi needed to say something complex is 100% false.
So his skeptical attitude, the thing his education gave him.
It actively negates their claim of knowing falsehood. He's saying the very thing you're using to prove I'm guilty is the reason I can't be.
That is just a stunning intellectual defense. So why didn't it work? Why was it just dismissed?
And that leads to the massive contradiction he pointed out, self-contradictory state. The court used his high cognitive ability to prove his guilt. Right.
Right.
But when he tried to use that same cognitive ability, his expert knowledge, to defend himself, like when he tried to explain complex systems theory to disprove the result, the judge just brutally interrupted him.
So they only respected his PhD when it served their narrative of guilt.
Exactly. Not when it could prove his innocence.
Unbelievable. Okay, so that covers his state of mind. Let's move to the Objective Act, the evidence itself. Was the content he shared actually false information in a legal sense?
This is where his analysis gets really precise. He starts separating the evidence into legal categories. And legally, for something to be a criminal rumor, it has to be a falsifiable statement of fact.
Something you can prove true or false.
Correct. So he starts taking the prosecution's evidence apart, piece by piece. First category, art and emotional expression.
Like the Umbrella Girl cartoon.
Exactly. He argued that art, or posts that express frustration or commemorate an event, are subjective. They aren't true or false. They're metaphors. They're feelings. To call a piece of art a rumor is just a fundamental category error. It's a massive overreach of the law.
That's a really important distinction, one that gets lost a lot in these online cases. A poem isn't a factual claim.
Precisely. Then you get to the second category, rational opinion and theory. These are political comments, economic analyses, scholarly views. They exist to be debated and criticized. If you criminalize them, the court basically becomes the final judge of what's acceptable academic thought.
Which would stifle any kind of intellectual environment.
And then the third category was official sources. He forwarded posts from the U.S. Embassy. That's public diplomatic information. A citizen sharing that isn't fabricating a rumor. They're engaging with a public statement from a recognized entity.
So this all raises a really practical question. Was he or is any citizen legally required to do professional level fact-checking before they hit the forward button?
No, absolutely not. And he made this point very clearly. To require that of ordinary citizens would create an impossible standard and a massive chilling effect on speech.
Because no one would share anything for fear of getting it wrong.
Right. He argued that investigating and clarifying rumors is the specialized job, the legal duty of state authorities like the police and cyber departments.
Huh?
You can't just illegally transfer that responsibility onto the individual taxpayer.
So the intent is undermined. The content itself doesn't legally qualify as rumor. Now we get to that third and maybe hardest to prove pillar. The result, serious public disorder. What was the actual chaos that resulted from this?
This is where the prosecution's case just completely falls apart. They provided no factual description of any chaos.
So no reports of riot.
No. No mass gatherings, no protests, no documented widespread panic, none of the kind of physical disorder that higher court precedents usually require for this charge.
So what did they have?
Just a conclusive assertion. They just stated that harm occurred, but without providing any facts or evidence to back it up.
An assertion without proof. And this is where Dr. Chen's scientific background became his sharpest weapon.
It's fascinating. He used his expertise in complex systems theory to basically offer a scientific disproof of their claim.
How?
Use a theory called self-organized criticality, or SOC. It's often explained with the analogy of a sand pile. You add grains of sand one by one, and eventually one single grain can trigger a huge avalanche.
Okay, I'm with you.
So he asked the court to view the social media platform as that complex system, as the sand pile. And his individual account was just one node in that system.
A single grain of sand.
A very, very small one. He showed, based on data, that his account had fewer than 100 followers, many of them inactive zombie fans, with extremely low engagement. He was, in scientific terms, a marginal node.
Meaning he was on the edge, not influential.
Exactly. And scientifically, a marginal node like that cannot trigger a systemic avalanche of disorder in a large, stable system. His tiny perturbation, a few forwards, was mathematically insufficient to push the entire system into chaos.
That's incredible. He's not just saying the chaos didn't happen, he's arguing it couldn't have happened based on the physics of the system.
But the ultimate proof, the real killer argument, was what happened after he was released.
The natural experiment.
Yes. Dr. Chen pointed out that after he got out of prison, his alleged criminal evidence, the exact same posts the court claimed caused this serious harm, they were still online, still accessible, and nothing happened. They generated no new attention, no discussion, and certainly no chaos. It was empirical, objective proof that the huge harm the court talked about was completely fictional. It had been subjectively constructed by the authorities just to make the charge stick.
Beyond all of this, the sources also allege that the judicial process itself was just riddled with failures.
That's the huge shadow hanging over the whole case. I mean, there are allegations the case was launched with literally zero evidence.
A first arrest, then fabricate evidence strategy.
So the allegation goes. The trial was also allegedly held in secret. It was not publicly conducted. His family wasn't allowed to be there, and his right to even present his full defense was restricted.
But the most profound legal error, that came at the appeal level, right?
It did. The second instance court, under Judge Li Jiangyuan, upheld the verdict without even an open hearing. And the reason they gave was that the defendant did not submit new evidence.
That's a complete reversal of how the law is supposed to work.
It's a profound legal error. It just shatters the core principle of presumption of innocence. The burden of proof is always on the prosecution to prove guilt.
Always.
By demanding that the imprisoned defendant provide new evidence to prove his own innocence, the court illegally transferred that burden. It turned the whole process into a self-proving conclusion.
So when you connect the dots from the indictment to the final ruling, you see a process that just seems to be systematically failing.
You see a clear legal error chain. It starts with a baseless indictment built on conclusions, not facts. That gets rubber-stamped by a judgment relying on this absurd, high-education guilt logic.
And then it's solidified.
Solidified by a final ruling that ignores appeal requirements and illegally reverses the burden of proof. The entire sequence just shows a systematic disregard for the rule of law.
So this deep dive really shows that Dr. Chen's self-defense, it wasn't just a passionate plea. It was a scientifically and legally rigorous takedown of the state's case on every single required element.
And the verdict in the end had to rely on logical fallacies, on procedural misconduct, and on the complete absence of legally required evidence.
What's so fascinating here is that central conflict, isn't it? The use of this vague catch-all charge to punish intellectual expression, to punish skepticism.
It is. Dr. Chen saw it as a direct attack on foundational constitutional rights. The right to speak, to think, and to criticize. He wasn't just arguing for himself. He was arguing for the right of a system to be able to handle dissent without breaking.
And that really brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Dr. Chen referenced historical figures like Giordano Bruno and Galileo, suggesting his case is a warning. He argued that when the law stops serving reason and facts, it just becomes the grammar of power. So the question for you is this. What is the invisible long-term cost to a society when knowledge itself gets redefined as a liability, when just being a critical skeptic is officially defined as troublemaking?
And what does the suppression of a single whisper really cost the stability of the entire system?